Welcome back from break. Everyone got their kind bars. By the way, is there like this metal canistered water outside as well? Oh yeah. Because I've been watching the speakers all day thinking that they were drinking Heineken or Coors Light. It turns out it's just water, so I was a little disappointed when I got this. Thanks for hanging out through the day. I know it's been a long day already. Oh man, that's a serious looking slide. That's like prison font right there. That looks like the still image from like a white-collar crime show. All right, that's me. By the way, the story behind that is that I was taking this photo 4 years ago. This is totally irrelevant. And I smile a lot. I'm generally pretty smiley, but I guess I'm not very good at smiling when a camera is taking pictures of me. And so the professional photographer that was doing this, I was at Spotify at the time. A lot of really important people, like executives, were getting their photos taken, and then me, I don't know why, but I was like the random dude. And I was smiling a little too much, and the lady literally said to me, "Smile less, you look like a perv, be professional." And this is what came out. This was me being professional and trying not to look like a perv. Yeah, so there you go, now you know a little bit about me. All right, so here's what I am actually going to talk about. You guys have spent a bunch of time today listening to people who really get how to create and distribute content. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the data around content consumption behavior over the course of the last 20-some years on the internet. We're going to go through it fast. We're not really going to dwell on any period of time too long. The goal really is for all of us to understand that there is shifting consumption behavior. I know you guys know it, but let's go review how those major shifts have happened, and let's talk about what that means for those of us who are content creators and distributors today. Speaking of which, I do want to define the word publisher here, because publisher means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. And depending on what industry you're in, and actually depending on what company in the same industry you're in, the word publisher may mean something completely different to you. For today's presentation, when I talk about publisher, I'm talking about digital publishers, people who are creating and distributing content on the internet. Okay, sometimes, and a lot of times it is both, that you're responsible for creating it as well as distributing it. As a caveat, I do think it is just as important if you're just a distributor. I'm a little bit biased because I work at a content aggregator and distributor, right? So we create only a small percentage of original content. Our role is to distribute everyone's best stuff. Okay? So that's just the definition of publisher for today. I'm going to start off by addressing probably the most common question that is in the heads of the people in the room right now, which is, Digg still exists? Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark. The answer is yes. Otherwise, somebody has been paying me for the last couple of years, and I don't know where the money's coming from, but the company still exists. I spent a lot of time, actually I'm going to go back here. I spent a lot of time in New York City wearing my Digg t-shirt. That's where the company is now. Mostly because I'm in the startup space, which means that my wardrobe is 5 t-shirts and 2 hoodies. And so that's one of the 5 t-shirts I own. And way too often, people will come up to me and say, "Yo, man, that's a cool vintage shirt." So 2 problems with that. Number 1, the shirt is from this year, because we just got them made. And number 2, even if it was from the old Digg, the logo looked like this. So it was different than the logo that we have now, slightly. But even if it was from the old Digg was founded, what, like 10 years ago? So this Bushwick interpretation of vintage is getting out of control. Digg was founded in 2004 by Kevin Rose and Jay Adelson. Hopefully, a number of you guys in the room still remember that site because it was really, really important. It effectively created the idea that wisdom of the crowds was a good way to organize or prioritize content discovery, right? So now what we refer to always as upvotes, back then was referred to as digs and berries. There are a number of sites during that time that Digg was founded in 2004 that were starting to try and do this. Digg was, in the early stages, the most impactful and the most successful. By 2006, Kevin Rose had become this whiz kid in Silicon Valley. This, by the way, the Business Week cover, he's going to be pretty upset if he ever finds out that I'm showing this because he really does not like this picture. If you ask him, the story is that he was actually trying to take a very real, mature picture, and they were just testing the lights. And so they literally just told him, "Hey, you can fool around with just testing the lights and camera." and he put his hat on backwards, put his headphones on, and did that, and they chose that as the cover, so he wasn't too happy about that. But Kevin mattered, and Digg mattered. By 2008, effectively around the publishing world in the United States, there was a term called Digg Effect. And what that meant was any publisher or content creator who could get their content, or the URL, some link onto the front page of Digg, they would see their servers meltdown. Right? They would have to actually spin up a bunch of servers. They would have to completely change how they do recirculation within their site. So they would have to prep for the potential of hitting the Digg effect. It was one of the most impactful distribution sites, and then on the consumer side, discovery sites on the internet. But then what happened was that rolling around 2010, the Digg team at the time released what is now infamously referred to as Digg V4. I could spend hours talking to you guys about what may or may not have gone right or wrong about Digg V4 and why Digg V4 ended up being the start of the end for the original version of Digg. But the reality, and I do want to actually push this agenda, because I actually don't think Kevin and his team get enough credit for this, is that they changed the fundamentals of the site because before anyone else did, they realized that social networks were going to completely change the way people discover and consume content. Before any of the major publishers, newspaper or otherwise, thought about Facebook as a threat, the Digg team said, all right, something's going on here, so we have to change our site, okay? And the product changes or decisions that were made were not core to what the community that had been built around Digg, they didn't really care for what it became, and they started leaving en masse. A lot of them went to Reddit, myself included back then, and I don't know if I'm allowed to admit that, but I did. And that version of the company by 2012 had been broken up into 3 pieces and sold off. Some stuff went to the Washington Post, a patent or 2, and some technology went to LinkedIn. And then the brand name went to a team in New York City that was tasked with reinventing what Digg really meant. Okay? And this, by the way, this is on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, is the BetaWorks logo. That's the studio company that bought the brand, and then our Digg logo now. We went back 4 years ago to the original DNA of Digg, which is that we want to be a channel for high-quality content discovery. Okay, the really, really good stuff that people were creating. We wanted to close that value gap between the creators and the consumers. And I think that we have done a pretty good job over the course of the last 4 years of reviving what was an iconic internet brand and doing something new with it. So we will come back to Digg in a little bit because I'm going to use it as examples of what I'm about to talk about. But in the interim, let's go and talk or look at this data. And the hypothesis I'm going to submit, or this, I guess it's not a hypothesis, it's a thesis, or the paradigm I'm going to submit, is that there have been 4 major different platform errors. Errors? E-R-A, not E-R-R-O-R. I grew up in New Zealand, so I still can't pronounce certain words properly. It's weird. So, okay, era? I have no idea how to pronounce that word. I should have chosen a different word. Platform, portal period. There have been 4 different sections of the internet, and they've been, very specifically, they've changed because of changing consumer discovery behavior and consumer consumption behavior. So let's take a look at this. The first one, 1995 to 2005, we often refer to as the portal era. And this was AOL's time. Right, at one point, AOL, 85% of all Americans that were on the internet were getting onto the internet through AOL. That's kind of crazy. But that's the reality of it, and maybe you guys still also remember that your experience of the internet, maybe your first experience of the internet, was the AOL starting page, right? Whether it's a You Got Mail chime or that weird-looking portal with the weird-looking search bar and then the sectional news. That was our experience of the internet for many of us, the first experience. What we saw and understood of the web was curated by and assembled by AOL. Our access to it was only through their eyes. When you talk about this era outside of the United States, the company that is always brought up is actually not American Online, it's Yahoo. I think most of us in the U.S. probably don't think about Yahoo as a portal because Yahoo to us was one of the first search engines. But outside of the United States, Yahoo was what AOL was for many, many years. People's experiences of the internet was purely through the Yahoo portal. Sometime in the mid-2000s, things really started changing. Sorry that there's going to be a bunch of eye charts. Two reasons. First, it's really easy to Google and let other people like back up your claims with charts. Charts are really easy to find on Google. And the second is you put an Asian guy on stage, there are going to be graphs in the deck. So hopefully you guys don't mind that there's so many graphs. There was a lot of uncomfortable laughter right there. Everyone agrees, but no one's sure if it's okay to laugh at that. It's fine. Sometime around the mid-2000s, things started changing on the internet. Before that, the reality was that it was actually very, very difficult to create a website. Even big media companies with a bunch of resources for R&D, they had a hard time creating quality websites. But in the mid-2000s, all these other services started cropping up where you and I, without any coding knowledge or understanding how to write HTML and build and use PHP and build databases, we could actually go ahead and put our thoughts online. That's when the world started to end. That was also a joke, but. So the number of websites started skyrocketing, and we peaked at 2014 when there ended up being about 1 billion websites, live websites in 2014. We've staggered down just a little bit since then. I think the number is somewhere around 800, 900 million at this point of active websites. But there was a huge inflection point in the mid-2000s. And so when you started having all these different websites, you also started having a massive amount of just overall content generation. Same kind of graph. Mid to late 2000s, things started taking off. More and more of us had our opinions broadcast onto the internet. And this is the period of time that really opened up the web. So 2005 to 2010, we often refer to this period of time as the open web era. And this is the space into which the original Digg launched itself. Okay, we need some other way of organizing everything that's out there. We need some other way of organizing or prioritizing what we should or should not be reading and watching. And then this happened, and I'm sure all of you guys have seen multiple versions of this chart before. Starting in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone, we get the mobile inflection point. We're shifting consumption behavior and the places through which we are discovering content from desktop to mobile, right? I mean, I'm not sure if we talk enough about how big, from a numerical standpoint, how big of a change this was. It took us 13 years to get to the first billion network sentient phones, devices. Okay, 13 years. And that was up to from 2000 to 2013, right? To get to 1 billion. It took us 3 years from 2013 to the middle of 2016 to get to the 2nd billion. Okay, so that we're still like completely on this rocket ship of mobile adoption. You can cut it however you want, whether or not you want to look at it from a mobile traffic point of view, if you want to look at it based on geography, all the graphs look exactly the same. So we ended up in 2010, 2015, this period of time where consumption and discovery of content was defined by the ever smaller mobile screen. Now, the company that really ruled this period of time, and still does when it comes to content discovery, is Facebook. A lot of people ask me when I talk about this period of time why I don't refer to it as a social era. Those two things in my mind go hand in hand. Because in a lot of ways, the value of social networks was, they became true values to our life, actual utility in our life because of the smartphone, right? One of the things that made Facebook, by the way, explode and become sticky, which we often forget now, was the fact that they were the first network through which it was easy to upload and share photos. Okay, that was the sticky part of Facebook. It wasn't status updates. It was certainly not the poke. It was the photo upload. And with the dawn of the smartphone, that's when the utility and the value of social networks really, really started to explode. So those two things in my mind go hand in hand. I'm oversimplifying the situation, but that's my claim. And so in the mobile era, we spent a lot of our time and energy as publishers trying to figure out how to take our content, squeeze onto a small screen, and start distributing it through other people's networks. And this is sort of where we started developing this new paradigm of content distribution and content creation and the way that you build content companies that we now refer to as the distributed media model. Companies like BuzzFeed, Now This News, as well as Upworthy have perfected this over the years, perfected different aspects of this over the years. Of course, BuzzFeed came up with the product of the listicle that was highly shareable. And that's part of the reason why they grew so incredibly fast. Now This News, you may not even know this company's name, but you ought to, because these are the guys who perfected the autoplay video that you see on the Facebook news feed that has no sound and just has the captions or subtitling that floats on top of the images. Right? That format, they really, really got right, and everyone else is now effectively copying their version of it. And then finally, Upworthy. At one point, the fastest growing internet site in history, they grew so fast because they figured out a way to programmatically test and optimize headlines. A little bit unfair because a lot of people think about Upworthy, they take Upworthy and they connect them to like link bait titles. That's not what they were trying to get at. They were trying to actually create a model that made sense in the social world and the mobile world that we live in. So these are the titles that say things like, dog sees owner for first time in 5 years. You won't believe what happens next, right? So Upworthy really got that right, and they grew extremely fast because of a bunch of different things. I don't want to piss anyone off, but one of the things was the fact that they got that component of content right. This model made it incredibly easy for us in the publishing and content world to grow new sites really, really fast. Because it was no longer necessarily up to our own scale. We got to grow it on the backs of somebody else's scale. That's a really, really good thing. It profoundly changed the way we think about online metrics. Now, if you're a publishing site, you don't have 100 million monthly active users. You're not like in the major conversations, right? We're gunning for the billion video views per month. Those are insane numbers. 4 or 5 years ago, it was nothing like that. Kevin Rose's version of Digg, at its height, it was reaching about 40 million monthly active users across all channels. And it was considered one of the most impactful websites on earth. Our version of Digg, which everyone looks at and goes, oh, that's cute. That's a cute iteration of Digg. We reach more people than Kevin Rose's Digg reached back then, now. But the numbers and the framework through which we view content consumption behavior has completely changed. A lot of it has to do with this distributed media model. So there are definitely pros to that, but there are really, really very real cons. Like this, is that when you are living and dying off of somebody else's network, the moment they change the rules of the game, you get impacted really badly. If you're a publisher sitting in this room, you know what this feels like, because all of us have experienced it over the last year plus. We've had conversations with we have really good relationships with practically every major publisher in the United States. And people are talking about 30% year-over-year drops in overall referral traffic, sometimes 60% year-over-year drops. And when most of these distributed media sites have 60 to 70% of their total traffic coming from social networks, these are enormous swings in their core business. That's a problem that we absolutely have to deal with. But not only this, we now have to deal with this. Again, eye chart, I apologize. Let me tell you what this means. This is a 20% year-over-year drop in downloads and installs for some of the largest native mobile apps in the marketplaces in the industry. This is not because of market saturation. It's literally because people are spending less time discovering native apps and less time using different ones. In fact, we know that 3 years ago, the average American mobile internet user would spend time in around 10 apps per day. That's actually a lot. It's a lot. Now that number is cut in half. It's 5. So we are consolidating our engagement into only a couple of apps. And guess what? The highest amount of engagement app is on our phone these days. I don't know if that was a good sentence, but you know what I am getting at. It's this next era that we're going into, which is messaging. messenger apps are not going to go away. Yes, we're just at the start of it here in the United States, and all of us are trying to guess whether or not we're going to reach the level of messaging engagement that we have seen in Asia for the last 2-3 years. I'm guessing that we will. These numbers are extraordinary. I believe sincerely that this next era that we're going into, and remember, I define it based on where content discovery and consumption happens, is going to be based on the messaging app as either a runtime or an operating system, however you want to think about it. These numbers are staggering. Last year in 2015, the top 4 messaging apps in the world passed the top 4 social networks in the world in total reach. The largest messaging apps in the world, their numbers are huge. WhatsApp and Facebook both now have over 1 billion monthly active users. Okay? WeChat in China, which is practically only in China, has over 750 million monthly active users. That, by the way, is about 95% of all monthly active mobile internet users in that country. Can you imagine having an app or a brand that has 95% monthly penetration in that large of a marketplace? Enormous ecosystems. Not just about downloads either, because it's actually about time engaged. Across the world now, millennials are spending around 30% of every single day in messaging. 30% of all of their screen time is in messaging. The crazy thing is, the 100% mark of screen time for millennials globally is over 7 hours a day now. 30% of that is staring at a messaging app. That's an amazing amount of engagement. An even worse eye chart, we're talking about the second line down here. 90% of people are using messaging every single day. It's not like Netflix, where yes, there's a lot of engagement, because every time we sit down with Netflix, we watch the entire Luke Cage series, so we're spending 15 hours in front of the TV. It's literally every single day I'm going into these apps and I'm spending 30% of my time in. That's the reality that we live in. That is where content distribution, discovery, and consumption has been happening in Asia for the last couple of years. I was talking about WeChat earlier. If you haven't paid attention to WeChat, please do. If you live in the content world, please go figure out what WeChat has accomplished in China and how it has fundamentally changed the publishing world. Major newspapers in China are no longer publishing even onto their websites. They've shut their websites down, not to mention native mobile apps. They're publishing only directly into WeChat, into messaging, because that's where people are finding articles and sharing articles and videos and discussing them with friends and family. Singular networks that have much larger scale than we've ever had access to in human history. And content in the United States, probably not taking advantage of it anywhere near enough right now. This is the complicated media world we live in. We still have to deal with distributed media and referral traffic from social networks. Don't get me wrong, that is not going away. We still have to deal with it every single day. Now we also have to start understanding the rise of messaging and what that fundamentally means for content distribution and discovery. We still have to deal with mobile screens. Historically, all this amazing content built for large format, squeezing down into 5 inches. And then finally, we have to deal with millennial content preferences that are constantly changing. This is why media companies who succeed employ like young millennials. The newsrooms are filled with 22, 23-year-olds right out of college. I'm not that old. I don't think I'm that old. I'm in my early 30s. But I don't understand today's internet. I will admit that to you, right? When the Vans video came out, damn, Daniel, when that video came out, one of our editors on the Digg newsroom, in the Digg newsroom, picked it up early, like 10, 15,000 loops on Vine at that point, RIP. Picked it up and showed it to us and said, yo, we got to put this on the front page. And I literally said, no, like this is stupid. Because I don't get it. Because I'm 10 years too old. But that's why newsrooms are filled with those folks. And if you are running a newsroom, make sure you have people who understand the pulse of the internet, and make sure these are folks that are plugged in enough that every single time, every few months, when that zeitgeist changes, they're not only understanding that, but they're willing to communicate that. It's really, really important. So these are 4 things we have to deal with in this complicated media world. So, what is it, as a content creator or content distributor or both, you should be thinking about. The way we build products today now is not just about high quality content anymore. A great piece of content no longer matters. Take Adam, for example, who was just on before me. His pieces of content are amazing. But without the right packaging and the right distribution, they would not have done Sandwich would not have been able to accomplish what that company has accomplished. They get this formula. Content, the right content, the best content, plus the right packaging for the perfect distribution channel. That is your content product. Let's walk through this one by one, using Digg as an example, because this is really the only one I'm qualified to really talk about. This is not self-promotion, I promise you that. Let's talk about our content. Digg's role is to find the best content on the internet. And that matters, making sure that we literally find, if we're going to say we're going to get to the best content on the internet, I can't half-ass it. So I literally have to see the entire internet, and I have to do my best to find the best content on the internet. So when you figure out what your content is, don't half-ass it, do everything you can to do that thing right. For us, it meant building tools. We built an RSS reader when Google Reader shut down. We now have 10 million RSS feeds that fit into that. We built a tool using Twitter, sitting on top of Twitter's network, right? Effectively, it's the same thing as what the early Nuzzle product was. You plug your Twitter account in, we see your entire stream, we help you organize it, but we see 200-some million tweets coming through that every single day. And what that ends up allowing us to see is practically the entire English language publishing world. 7.5 million new URLs containing written or video content every single day. Every day, 7.5 million new things come into our pipes. And we take all of that and we filter them algorithmically until we have a couple of thousand that we believe is high quality. I'm not going to tell you how we do a quality score because that will be another hour-and-a-half talk. But we filter it down using quality algorithms, and then we have a human editorial team that sits on top of that to pick the 100 to 120 best pieces that go on our site every single day. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of investment in technology that doesn't go into other things. It doesn't go into marketing spend. We don't have marketing spend because we spend so much time building stuff, but it's because to get to the best content, you have to do that. You have to commit to that. But then on top of that, you need the right packaging. I actually have no idea why I put that clustering and Digg rank thing. I think it's mostly to impress you guys. That doesn't have a whole lot to do with packaging. So we're going to ignore that. But we are going to talk about packaging, okay? This is one of our story units that sits on the front page. The way you as a content creator should be thinking about packaging or thinking about content in general is this. Content is now made up of multiple different components. Yes, the aggregate product matters. If you're the New York Times and you've done, or the New Yorker, and you've done some crazy long-form investigative journalism, the entire product at the end of the day matters. What your hero image is at the top, the way that the font that you use, when you scroll through the site, what it looks like, the video that comes in and autoplays in the middle of that, all of that stuff, that matters. That is your product. But you can't think of it as just that anymore. You have to think about it as components. Because when you take that singular product and you shove it into different sized boxes, it better not all look the same. So we think about our content as components. The first thing here for us is image. I know it says quality image, and that you may not, it's very subjective what quality is, but this image represents the article quite well, okay? So choose an image that actually, this is for us, and I'm using us as an example. The image matters for us because that is going to be the first engagement with it, with your content almost all the time. The second component that we have is tone and personality. This is our voice. So our voice primarily comes down to the way that we write our headline, and more importantly, the way that we write what we call the kicker, which is that all caps thing right above the headline. This article is about a horse race, effectively Australia's version of the Kentucky Derby, where a large amount of alcohol is consumed every single year. And so our kicker here is down under the influence. Right? That communicates our voice. That is who Digg is, what Digg believes this is about. And then finally, for us, the deck matters. This is a content summary because we know all of y'all do this. You read the summary, the summary of it, and then you go ahead and decide whether or not you agree with the article, and you immediately go ahead and share it without clicking through and reading it. We know you do that. So we should better get this content summary right. These are our components. The story itself is one thing. The components matter because the way that we shift it back and forth is the packaging for our content. which leads to distribution. The channels that you are distributing through, and you hopefully will have multiple, the people that are on each of those channels are probably very, very different. You have to understand that what they're looking for and the way that they're consuming are very, very different. Let's take 3 as an example. The first one here, Digg distributes through Facebook, like a lot of other media companies. We know on Facebook our audience, generally speaking, looking for videos. And they're looking for a very specific type of video. Over the course of the last 6 months, one of the most popular videos of ours that we curate on Facebook have been the hydraulic press ones. I don't know if you've seen these, literally people just crushing crap with hydraulic presses. It's super satisfying watching these things just explode because of the slow-moving hydraulic press. So we know our audience, we know what they're looking for. We're going to package our content and choose the right content for the right distribution channel. The second channel for us is Twitter. People follow Digg on Twitter looking for stuff that they don't find on Facebook. Not the viral stuff, the more kind of long-tailed, niche, smaller publications, high-quality journalism. This happens to be a video, but this is probably a video that you never saw on Facebook. So we have decided to distribute this video about a 15-year-old who really has ordered her entire life around going to Mars. Right? That video is being distributed primarily on Twitter, to our Twitter audience. And then finally, we have a lot, 500,000 users on our email list. And our email users actually engage with Digg only through email. As in, they don't come to Digg.com. They open email every single morning. They just click through to the articles directly from email. They don't come to our homepage. And what they're looking for is they're looking for some kind of short curated list of the most interesting things that they're supposed to read over the course of the next, the 10 minutes they have in the morning with us, that either catches them up from the last 12 hours or sets them up for the next 12 hours. So the way that we package that piece of content is exactly for that use case. Again, I'm going to use Adam as an example. How awesome, this talk would have been so much more awesome if we put Adam's mouth over mine and had him talk for me, because his voice is amazing. I'm gonna take Adam and Lonely Sandwich without their permission as an example here. Lonely Sandwich ads follow me around everywhere I go on the internet because they're super popular and they're really, really good, or at least the companies that they're made for are really, really good at using them for marketing, right? But everywhere I go, the ad is slightly different. I have been seeing the NavD ad everywhere. That's the heads-up display car thing that Lonely Sandwich did a launch video for. On Facebook, it's an autoplay video with the Now This News version of it. No sound and literally what Adam is saying overlaid in subtitles. That's how it's presented to me. On Twitter, it's a GIF of the heads-up display projecting, oh, that caught my attention. I'm going to click in to the product page, right? And then on YouTube, of course, as a pre-roll ad, is the full ad itself. The same piece of content for the same purpose, packaged completely differently for different distribution channels. It is a complicated world we live in as content creators and content publishers. It's a fun world. We get to rely on other people's channels. We get to move really, really fast and break things because the consumption behavior loop is constantly changing. And hopefully, we get to learn from each other and help each other along in discovery of these new channels as they come up. All right, I've talked enough. Thank you. I think we have some questions.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. So you talked a lot about messenger apps, sorry. What is your stance on chatbots and their importance moving forward with that?
Good question. Chatbots, we're still early on in chatbots. For chatbots to become good, we really have to get artificial intelligence right. And there are a couple of major companies working on artificial intelligence that are starting to get it right. Google, certainly one of them, IBM with Watson, Microsoft to some degree. For those of us who are working in small startups, that AI is still out of reach. We're still not there yet. I believe that chatbots are really, really going to matter in replacing human customer service. I think that when it comes to commerce, or when it comes to customer service, if I have to get on the phone one more time with Time Warner Cable, I can't, right? I would love to replace that engagement with a chatbot. I think that's where chatbots are really going to shine through messaging. For something like what we do in content, I don't think conversational intelligence matters. I don't think anyone's going to go to a messenger app and type in long sentences and expect you as a content creator or distributor to be able to interpret what they're actually asking, and give them the right piece of content. I think where messaging matters for us as content distributors or creators, publishers, is that we already know so much about each of these individual users. We should be able to assume the best piece of content, the right piece of content at exactly the right time for them. So what I push them through messaging in the morning should be exactly what they need. If I know that they want the 3 largest and most important pieces of hard news in the morning, that's when I'm going to push them. And then I probably know that 3 in the afternoon, because of our data, everyone goes on Digg's video page around 3 or 4 in the afternoon to get an afternoon break. So I should take a funny video from the last 3-4 hours and push that to them at 3 p.m. through Messenger. So that kind of intelligence matters, not conversational chatbot intelligence.
Awesome. And then last question. So we, obviously, Hustle, we have a daily newsletter. You're mentioning you guys do that as well. Obviously, we believe in it. Why do you think email, being such an old kind of form of distribution, is still so effective?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's because everyone uses it. It is the single largest penetration platform on the planet, right? Messengers may eventually get there, but right now it's still relatively fragmented. You can get access to 2.5 billion people across Messenger, but it's across the 8 largest messengers around the world. So if you're going to build distribution and build packaging and the way that your content looks, you have to build it 8 times to get it right for each messenger. But email, it's the same. Everyone is on it. It's easy. We can't live without it. The daily active user rates are still the highest of anything, any protocol in the world. So that's why.
Awesome. Thank you very much.